and I'll let you know, I'm recording just because I don't want to miss anything, but I'll let you know what I find out because I'm taking the next class from
Right.
Chris, which is an 8-week course that will help me build my course, my program. So that's the monetization of it.
Right.
So there is a way.
Good luck with it. Keep me up to date.
I will. I certainly will. So I wanted to talk about, and we're not official yet. I'll make the break so that we know when we're going to start. But
Right.
I during COVID, I made it a point to just get really brave and reach out to people who have inspired me. And I've asked them if they would be on my podcast. And I have been so thrilled at how many people said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you've always, I don't even remember how I first heard about you, but it was in 2006 in March that I became connected with you and I became part of the One community.
Yes.
And ever since then, so I have all of the books since then. I have, you know, my
Awesome.
collection of your books right here.
Hi.
And so what I want to ask you when we get into the part about just having the conversation is how you got where you are. I know you were CEO of Manpower, but I'm going to back it up as far as you want to back up. I'm
Right.
always fascinated about how people are who they are. And so I'll just ask you a bunch of questions about you and your history. And then this book has been one of the most important books I've ever read.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've got some since and before, but this is the one that it's my go-to for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have a lot that we can just talk about if we just sort of riff it and we don't make it too formal.
Sure.
How's that sound?
With me, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, fine.
Okay.
And about me, is my quality voice okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Good.
All right.
And yeah.
So I've got a bio from your website, a current bio, and I'll just read parts of that if that's
Right.
okay.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then I'll just let you tell us about you, because I think my experience of you is that you are an experience. Being with you is an experience that is difficult to talk about. And I have never even been with you in person. So I can only imagine what it would be like to be in your physical space. I've had your CDs and I've, as the One community, I used your CDs with some of the things that I did. But actually being in your presence, I can only imagine. And that must be how it feels for people who go on your ski retreats and do the things with you. So
Be careful what you wish for.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'll leave that out there. So I'm going to start like now. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Jody, and I am thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with I'm going to call you a mentor, Lance. You've been so important to me in my life since I first learned about you in 2006. And this is our 4th episode of the Circle Up and Get Real podcast and my 2nd interview, and I'm thrilled that it's you. So I'm going to do the little formal piece about telling who you are. Dr. Lance Secretan is the world's top authority on inspirational leadership, a trailblazing teacher, advisor, and expert on corporate culture, whose best-selling books, inspirational talks, and life-changing retreats have touched the hearts and minds of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. And I could go on and on and on and talk about all of your amazing credentials. But what I know about you, just from knowing you this long, there's something about how you make my heart feel even when I'm millions of miles away from you. So one of my favorite books is your book called Inspire, What Great Leaders Do. And Lance, I don't want to downplay your bio. I'll put it in the show notes. Mm-hmm. But I just want to thank you before we even start talking for who you've been to me in the world.
Oh, thank you. That's kind of you. Thank you.
Well, it's more than kind, Lance. I mean, it's how you've impacted the world. So I have a lot of questions for you about how you got to be who you find yourself to be right now. I'm sure we all have our story. We all have our origin story. Can you just tell us, you live in Canada and Colorado.
Right.
Who are you, Lance Secretan?
Maybe I'll find out one day.
It's a journey.
I don't know. When I grow up, right?
Right.
Who am I? That's an interesting question. Well, as you said, I'm a teacher. Um, I started out as a child actor. So if you want to Google me, go to imdb.com and you'll see all the film credits and so on. I was the best known child actor in the English speaking world for about 10 years or so.
Wow.
Till my voice broke. And I was in, you might know the film Heidi. Do you remember
Yeah.
Heidi at all?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I was Peter.
Oh
So
my.
that was the sort of thing that, I had a whole long history of that. So that gave me a lot of things that have been very useful in my life since. For instance, how to communicate,
Mm.
how to use your voice as an instrument. When in my world, I'm a public speaker, I lecture a lot, I teach students and so on. So uh, presenting and how you present is an underrated activity for leaders. Most leaders haven't got a clue how to do that. They're very clever intellectually, but they can't communicate their vision and their ideas properly. And as you know, when you see someone who can do that, like Barack Obama or Steve Jobs, people like that, it's powerful.
Mm.
And when you see others who just can't do that, it's sad. They've got a great deep story to tell, but they can't tell it.
Mm.
So that gave me a very early start in that. And it was at a young age, so it was heavily imprinted on me. So I don't have to think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a job when I was 27 years old, which is kind of ridiculous, running Manpower.
Yeah.
And I don't know what possessed the man that chose me to do that job, because I had no experience. I'd never been a CEO or really a leader. I was sales manager of a company at the time. And I ended up in England, and I spent 14 years there. And we built this business from scratch to 72,000 employees. And then I quit. I didn't need to work anymore. And I started teaching in the university. And that was a serious wake-up call.
Mm.
By then I had accumulated a few degrees, including a degree, a PhD from London School of Economics. I was teaching at the university in Canada, and it was nutty because what we were teaching was nothing like I had experienced running a company.
Mm.
And I realized how broken the university system is. So I wrote my own book. And it became a bestseller, and people started calling me saying, can you come and work with us? And so pretty soon I couldn't carry my teaching load and my consulting, so I quit university, which was not a difficult decision. I think it's Henry Kissinger who said, the politics of the university make me yearn for the politics of the Middle East. And
Wow.
the damning of that world. So then from then on, it just grew. That's 35, 40 years ago now. And I've just been 22 books later, and lots of companies that I've been working for, and great leaders that I've worked with and so on around the world. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so that there's so much more to unpack with that, but what drew me to you when I first found out about you in 2006 was the spiritual element that you have in your being, which comes out in your books. You're an amazing writer. I love the way you write, and I was a writer in college. That was my major, so I really appreciate good writing, and you just capture things for me that cause me to want to be a better leader. And the first book that I found about yours was The Art and Practice of Conscious Leadership. Can you go back to this book and remember what it was about this book that compelled you to write it?
Well, two things. One was, it was very shortly after the big tsunami in India. And that, as you may remember, killed a lot of people. But the book opens up with a story about two people sitting in a sidewalk cafe having a shrimp cocktail, and then unpacks that all the way back to where those shrimp came from,
Mm.
and the removal of the mangrove swamps in that part of the world, and therefore the disruption that it created and caused the tsunami. The tsunami would never have created that damage if we hadn't had this gigantic shrimp industry around the world.
Wow.
So the story really is an example of connectedness. You think you're sitting in New York City eating a shrimp cocktail, but there's a lot behind that story, and including the disruption of the world. So the story begins that way so that the story illustrates everything is connected. Let's pretend that it isn't. And one of the quotes, I think it's on the first page, is that when we are unhappy, sad, broken, or wounded, it is because we're separated from what and whom we love. And when we're inspired and joyful and happy and in bliss, it's because we're one with what and whom we love. And that explains all of life's adventures.
Simple enough and very relevant. I mean, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about what's happening right now as we record this on Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020,
Right.
in the world. You're in Canada right now.
Yes.
From what I understand, it's not as prevalent. The rioting is not as prevalent in Canada as it is in the US right now.
I don't think there's any rioting here.
Okay. So there are lots of reasons we could talk about why that is.
Right.
You might not know this, but right before we got on to have our conversation, Keith Ellison in Minnesota, who took over the George Floyd trial, elevated the charges from 3rd degree to 2nd degree murder. And so that's causing a ripple in the United States. I live 4 hours from Minneapolis where all this happened. And so it feels really close to me in a lot of ways. I have friends who live there. And what you said about one and the impact of the shrimp and everything, it's obvious right now where we are. Do you have any thoughts about that? Why we felt
Well, yeah, I'm not really in any position to make any judgments on that. But what seems painfully obvious to me is that violence attracts violence. So if you arm the police and turn them into a military force, you're going to bring out the very worst in the protesters.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the British don't have arms. The police don't have arms. And as a consequence, they don't have the same sorts of issues. And in fact, any country that doesn't have guns or military equipment doesn't have the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what should we be doing? Well, I love the stories also, which we don't tell enough, about the cities in America where the police are walking arm in arm with the protesters. Mm-hmm. And those are stories that we don't play up, but you know, that they're equal to the other story, right? And the other thing is that, you know, somebody asked me the other day, what would you do? Well, what I do is I'd invite the protesters into the White House. I'd sit them down and say, let's work this out. Mm. We need to do something different. This has been going on for 200 years. We have to stop this. And we can talk about it and we can get it done. Mm-hmm. We just need the right leadership.
Mm. Okay, so there it is. Your work was called Higher Ground Leadership. Is it still called Higher Ground? Is that what you?
It is. Yep.
And that was formed. When did you start that, your organization, Higher Ground Leadership?
Well, it's a name that is sort of like an umbrella for all our work. So the book Reclaiming Higher Ground, which I think is 1995 or so, that one really began the whole journey of, and there were two parts to that book. It's a pretty big book, but there are two messages. One is we need to start asking questions instead of always having answers. That's a lesson for our time too. And the other thing we need to do is to move into a place where our spirit, our soul, has an equal presence to our ego. So that, I'm not saying the ego has to go away, but at least let's elevate something we've been suppressing for so long. We can't even use that word in the workplace. You start talking about spiritual things in the workplace, they'll think you're weird, which is ridiculous, because we are human spirits having a human experience, as dear Teilhard de Chardin said.
Yeah. And are you still seeing that? It's still, because I'm seeing a little bit of shift where we're able to say a little bit more than we used to about spirit, love in the workplace. Are you seeing that in your work?
Yeah, I see a shift. I've been around a long time, so I'm getting a bit worn out with the shift, which then disappears, and then comes back, and we have another crisis, and then disappears. And I hope this is more long-lasting. I think, personally, that COVID has been the greatest blessing, because I think it's revealing and accelerating the things that have been there all along, including race, but also the uselessness of downtown buildings and commuting and burning up gas every day and wasting people's lives traveling and stuck in traffic jams and all that stuff. We're going to see a change to that. And, you know, people who get on airplanes and burn up gas and pollute the world to go to a conference and then come back again. Why do we do that? And why does it take in this crisis to help us understand that's not a good idea?
Yeah.
We'll do some of that in the future, but we'll do a lot less of it too.
Yeah. Well, so there are a couple things we could talk about with that. I feel connected to you even if I'm not in person with you. And I also know that when I'll assume that when you have your in-person retreats, a lot of amazing things happen. And so there are both sides to that. You said we might not do as much of it, but there's
Right.
still something about being with people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's different for different personality types. So if you're an introvert, what we're doing right now is just fine. But if you're an extrovert and you need to touch and smell people and see the whites of their eyes and read their body energy and experience their physical presence, this is not going to work for you. So, you know, it depends who you are.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about your retreats and how that came to be, and just tell us what that's like for the people who come to is it in Colorado that you have those usually?
Both. We do both in Colorado and in Ontario. We do all kinds of different things. I'm very keen on experiential learning. So we teach through skiing. I'm a passionate skier and I live on a mountain in Colorado. So I actually bring leaders to come and ski with me, and I teach them how to ski double black diamonds in one day.
Wow.
So the idea is that we don't need to, first of all, use the old system. So I am a ski instructor, but I don't use the professional techniques of ski instructors. And secondly, we can make breakthroughs immediately. So we're talking one day. People who are intermediate skiers skiing advanced skiing terrain in one day. And everybody said, no, it can't be done, but it is done. And then in the summer, same thing with kayaking and mountain biking. It's the experience, the visceral experience. If you're in a mountain setting, 10,000 feet, and it's the most magnificent scenery, and you're experiencing a real live event viscerally, you know, like in your heart, in your physical being. You're going to go down a 1,000-foot cliff on your skis. You're not going to forget this.
Yeah.
And what is the metaphor and the lesson? So people go home, they don't need an airplane. I mean, they're so inspired. They're doing things they never dreamed they would do, because what happens is we have this curve, you know, that we learn how to ski at an early age in our lives. This is true metaphor for life. We get to faster learning. We get to our 20s, then we get married. We get responsibilities, mortgages, and so on. We slow down, and we get to 40s and 50s, we get a little creaky. And then by the time we're in our 60s and 70s, we quit all together. Well, that's a metaphor for life. That's how we learn leadership. We learn very fast when we're early and young. Then we plateau and we think we know everything, and we don't learn anymore. So they come along, these folks, and they arrive, and we take them to a cliff edge. And we say, okay, we're going to go down this cliff. And of course, they're terrified, a lot of them. And the key point that I make for them is that when you learn to ski, one of the things you learn is how to snowplow. And if you snowplow, you're going to die here. So I'm going to ask you, do not snowplow. And until you agree not to snowplow, I'm not going to teach you how to get down here. Teaching you how to get down is easy. Getting you to stop doing what you've been doing for 30 years is really hard.
Wow.
And that's the core of the lesson.
Wow. Well, and isn't that a metaphor for everything in the whole wide world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing I think about the book one, which is the core of the book, is that it's where I first introduced the Castle Principles. And the Castle Principles are an acronym. And what I did was I did some research to find out, what do people not like about leaders? And what they said was, well, we don't like cowards. We don't like people who are inauthentic and phony. We don't like people who are selfish. We don't like people who lie. We don't like people who rule with fear. And we don't like people who are incompetent, idiots. So we said, well, then, you know, it's not really rocket science. Why don't we just do the opposite? And the opposite was courage, authenticity, service, truthfulness, love, and effectiveness. And an interesting story about this, I have a friend, Marianne Williamson, you may have known her name.
Yes.
And she was a presidential candidate in this year's election.
Yes. And
she wrote a book called A Return to Love, which part of the words from there were part of Nelson Mandela's inauguration speech. And she's a good friend, and I went to visit her with my wife. We stayed with her when she lived in Detroit. And I told her I was so excited. I said, Marianne, I'm working on this whole new idea about the castle principles, and here's what they stand for. And she said, just a minute, let me guess. C is for courage, A is for authenticity, S is for service, T is for truthfulness, L is for love, and E is for energy. And my mouth dropped. Energy is not the word I chose, but it's a good word. It could easily have been that. But how did you do that?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I know your work and I know what you believe in and your philosophy, but here's the thing. There's nothing new here. There's nothing for us to learn.
Mm.
What we have to do here is remember. We've forgotten. And so if you take truthfulness, there's no one on the planet more truthful than a baby. That's the moment, the peak of our truthfulness in our lives. We will say anything we want and do anything we want. We have no fear, and we say it like it is. And then it goes down from there. And so we sit in meetings, for example, as adults, and we don't say our truth, or we say things which are untrue.
Mm-hmm.
We hear people suggesting strategies and plans and programs and so on. We don't say anything about how bad they are. And we just take it, suck it up, and do it. Well, that is an inauthentic, untruthful way of behaving. But if we just remember what we learned a long time ago and get it back and live it, then the castle principles become the core idea for how we become inspiring people. Because people love courageous people, people who are authentic, people who serve others, people who tell the truth, people who are loving, and people who are effective.
Yeah, I loved that when I was teaching it, when I was one of your facilitators for this program. And I remember learning through the training of this, that this isn't like you just said, it's intuitive. It's not something you have to learn. It's something you have to remember. And so it's so much easier to teach and to support others in that, because it isn't like they have to change their mindset. They just have to go back and undo some of the things that they had learned on top of what they already knew.
Right. And as you said earlier, using the word love, for example, in the workplace is clunky for some people.
Mm.
But if you think about it logically, what is it about love that's awkward?
Yeah.
What's the matter with us? What's going on in our brain that we can't say to each other, I love you,
Yeah.
I love your work,
Yeah.
I love what you do for customers, I love working here. What's the matter with us?
Right. What has happened to us that has damaged us so much that innate principle has gotten buried?
Right. And so we just need to reveal it again. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me, I'm just going to the book, because there's the funny little story you tell about medicine, the root of the matter, if you remember, where you said 1000 BC, they used to say, here, eat this root.
Right.
And then 1000 AD, the story was, that root is heathen, say this prayer. And then we get to 1800, that prayer is pure superstition, here, take this potion. And then in 1940, that potion is snake oil, here, take this pill. And then in 1980, that pill is ineffective, take this antibiotic. And by 2000, we were saying the antibiotic doesn't work, eat the root.
Right. Right. We go around in circles, don't we?
What goes around comes around. And that's why I think right now, your point that you made earlier about COVID and about where we find ourselves now, you said, I'm so tired of having things keep coming around. And if this will serve us the way I can't imagine it can't, we've been isolated for 2 months, at least 2 months, where the whole world has shut down. I don't think any of us in our memory have any recollection of something that monumental happening to the whole world.
No. Well, you have to be as old as I am. Because I do remember, for instance, the Second World War, where we had a similar situation. Now, there were still people running around, but a lot of people missing, of course, because they're at front, right? But so, yeah, some of us have seen something like it. But you're right. Most people haven't, and we know how to deal with it, and we're getting exhausted from it, too.
Right, right. Well, the actual war that was happening in person, the shooting, and was isolated to one part of Europe. And so we in America were sending people there for World War II. It was affecting us, I'm guessing, not as much as this COVID thing, which has everybody wear masks at best, stay in their homes with the doors closed at I was going to say worst, but I guess at the most, the other end of that. And I just, it's mind-boggling to me. Even now, when we talk about putting on top of that the George Floyd race riots and things that are happening, and now that's going to Europe. That was one, if you will, isolated incident. We know it wasn't, but the straw that broke that camel's back was George Floyd and that episode. And now that is going viral, if you will. And I think there's a lot of pent-up angst, emotion, anger, frustration in a lot of ways that through COVID, through this, needed to just come out.
Yeah. And it shows too that we're one. The pain in Minneapolis is being experienced and felt in London,
Yeah.
and in Tokyo and in Paris. It's a shared pain. We're humans, and we're a tribe, and we're united.
So the work you do in corporate America, when you are, like I have on my bulletin board, the meditation of a new story leader, where you start meetings, or you have the ability to start meetings with a gathering meditation. What that does, at least it does online. I've been using it online to start meetings. I can't imagine not having that available to us, yet we're still afraid to do things like that. You talk about source, which to me is God. And the end of that meditation says, let us share sacred space together on higher ground.
Right.
It feels so obvious once you understand it.
Right.
Can you talk about a distinction that you might see between organizations that are reclaiming higher ground and those that maybe haven't done that yet?
I think I'm not sure I know the answer to this, because it continues to be a mystery. One of my clients, my largest client, in fact, is Microsoft. And Microsoft has, if you've watched them over the last 6 years, they've completely transformed themselves. This is an entirely different company than it was 6 years ago, even though it's the 50th biggest company in the country, and actually the most valuable company in the world right now, even more than Apple. So what's happened? Well, you get a guy like Satya Nadella, who's the CEO. And just to give you an example, he's from India. He brings an Eastern philosophy to the table, quite different from a Western MBA, Harvard kind of approach, although he's well educated. And they have created a dream. Now, part, of my work is about creating dreams in organizations, not mission statements, but dreams. What's the dream here? Why do we come to work? What's the point of what we do? Now, here's the mission statement from Microsoft, is to put a computer on every desk. Now, you can hear that in that language. It's all about me. And it's all about making all my widgets, as many as I possibly can, and having them dispersed as much as possible into the marketplace. That's a totally self-serving, narcissistic perspective of the world. Along comes Satya Nadella, and he throws that out, and he says, our dream is to empower every person and individual on the planet to achieve more. That changes everything, because it's no longer about me. It's all about you. We're here to serve you and empower you to do more and to change the world. And that energy takes a company that size and pivots it into an entirely new direction, and adds, by the way, hundreds of billions of dollars of value to the company. I think I buy stock in my favorite clients. I bought stock in Microsoft at about, I don't know, $28, $30, somewhere around there. Wow. It's $150 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has gone down in the market.
Well, I think for that's why I love Inspire, your book Inspire, because you give the distinction, the couple that I use a lot, you give the distinction between motivation and inspiration, which I totally love. Motivation is external and based on fear. It provides a motive and pushes, is the way I look at it. Inspiration is internal. It's not a doing, it's a being. And when we inspire, we invite others to just be inspiring with us. That's what I love about the way you've described that. You also talk about, instead of mission, vision, values, you talk about destiny, cause, and calling. And you talk about terra threats and terra fixes. Would you just explain a little bit more about those concepts?
Sure. Let's start with the whole idea of destiny, character, and calling. Now, that's changed. Inspire, by the way, is the only book that I do not own the rights to.
Okay.
Over the years, I've realized that publishers don't do a lot for you, so I've acquired all the rights. We formed a publishing company and so on. But Inspire still sells, and Wiley won't let me have it back.
Interesting. Okay.
Making money from it.
Nice.
So, that book talked about destiny, cause, and calling, and it was the result of research into living and dead leaders. But in subsequent books, I updated the cause piece to character, because what I learned in time was that there are three things that great leaders, and I'm talking about historically great leaders, Nelson Mandela and so on, what the three things they knew were, why am I here? How am I going to be while I'm here? And what am I going to do? We call this for shorthand, the why be do. And it's answering the question of what am I going to do with my life? What's the higher purpose? I'm not here just to make shareholders increasingly wealthy or to sell more stuff. What's the higher purpose of that? What's the big idea? And many times I teach this by saying to people, supposing you're in heaven and God calls you into the boardroom and says, I've got this job that I haven't finished. It's a consulting assignment. It's called Earth, and it's not done yet. I need you to go to Earth and fix it, okay? I'm going to give you 100 years and all the help you need. Just call if you need anything. Poof, up you go to Earth. You're on Earth, and you do your thing, and you come back. And God says, okay, so how did you do? And your answer to that question is your destiny. You better have a good answer, because that's what it's about. And everybody that I studied, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and so on, they had a higher purpose, a destiny. You knew what it, and most of us know what they were, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and so on. And they had a character statement. Now, none of them followed this pattern, I'm sure, but they lived it. So the character statement's about, how do you want to be? How do you want people to know you? What are the characteristics that would define you? If I asked, well, how's Jody? Tell me about Jody. What do you want them to say? You know, that she's fat and ugly and bad-tempered and miserable? Or do you want them to say she's beautiful, she's charming, elegant, graceful, loving, inspiring? Those are the things you want people to say, so you have to live that. Because you can't demand it, you have to earn it. Therefore, you have to be the person that you want people to think of you as. So this is the character statement. And lastly, the calling. What are you going to do with your life? What are the gifts and talents you have, and how are you going to use those to serve others? Put those three together, and I often say to people that people have that. The Dalai Lama, for example. If the Dalai Lama walked into the room that you're in, sat down for 5 or 10 minutes, didn't say anything, walked out again, you'd be inspired. It's not what he said, it's who he is. And it's who he is that inspires you. And we always say to students that we teach, what is it you're teaching when you're not speaking?
Yeah.
Who you are is what you're teaching, not what you know.
Yeah. It feels like there's nothing more that needs to be said after that, because it really is an essence. And you know, it is the core of who we're being is not what is on the outside. It's what's on the inside. And that's the connection piece that I think when people have a longing to be, I'm using a little bit of Peter Block's work with the book Community, where he talks about the longing to be is what belonging means.
Right.
They can be connected, like you said, with the Dalai Lama without him even saying anything, because there's this innate connection. That's what I've always felt with your work. And every time I've seen you on CDs back in the day when we used to have CDs, I had CDs to use. It's just a being. It really is just a being and an essence that I sense from you.
Well, you have to model it, don't you? And I many years ago, I don't know how long, probably 30 years ago, I used to travel around with carousels, you know, with Kodak carousels with slides in them, glass slides. And so I was presenting once in Vancouver, British Columbia. No, in Whistler, British Columbia. So I was in the movie theater. And the movie theater was full, and I was making a presentation there with the slides. And the projector was up in the projection room, 400 feet away. And for some reason, the projectionist couldn't get the thing to stay still. So he was holding it.
Oh,
So when you hold it, you know, if the slightest tremor moves the thing 6 feet across
right.
the screen, the people were getting nauseous, you know, watching this thing flying around all the, and I stopped in the middle of my presentation and I said something like, for Pete's sake, can't you hold that thing still? And in that moment, I lost my audience
Mm,
because I wasn't walking my talk.
mm.
And I learned from that, never, ever separate the message and the messenger.
Ooh,
They have to be the same.
yeah. Isn't it great that you have that awareness that allows you to go back and learn from your own mistakes, if you will, things that you wish you could do differently? I mean, that's the beauty of awareness to me, is everything becomes a story that I can share from what I've learned about the things that maybe didn't go the way I wanted them to.
I think there's always something there, honestly. I remember, again, long ago, I lost a daughter. I have 3 daughters, and one of them died when she was 19. And I was brokenhearted. And but at the time, this would be in the 70s. And at the time, I was in a place where it was not masculine to cry.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't cry,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to cry. So I'd sit in my car and cry.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about that today, how stunted I was emotionally, you know, at that point.
Right.
But I learned from that I couldn't hold it in, that I needed to cry. And I used to share that story in my speeches because I know many people have children that have died. And many people can resonate with the idea that we do need to be emotional. We
Mm-hmm.
need to release our emotions, and to bottle them up and say they can't exist, or at work, you're not allowed to do that, and so on. It's just not natural for us. And it's toxic. It makes us ill. So, you know, that, as you say, we learn from all of our pains.
And then you are brilliant at sharing, and maybe this is overstepping a little bit, but this book,
Yeah. Right.
um, a love story, which is your
Yeah.
memoir, which
Yeah.
is, I don't have words for this book. How did you do that? How did you write that book? And could you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Well, I was married to an amazing woman called Trish, who died now nearly 6 years ago. We had an incredible relationship. 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
never a fight in all that time. Just a magic. It's truly an extraordinary experience. And she passed away. I was devastated. Over the years, I'd written some poetry for her, totally privately. I hadn't ever published it or anything. I don't see myself as a poet.
Mm.
And I thought, well, I'm going to dust this off and see if any of this sort of stands up at all. So I polished it up a little bit, and then I wove a narrative around the poems to describe our journey together, and published it. Really, as it's probably my favorite book, but my least successful book. I
Oh,
guess. Yeah, I don't think people want to read about uh, a love story journey in that way, or at least it
mm.
seems like I don't. Maybe I haven't marketed it right. I don't know. Anyway, it was a tribute to her, and a sharing, because I wanted other people to know they too can have this.
Would you allow me the pleasure of reading one of these?
Yes, of course.
Would you mind which one?
No.
Okay, so I just opened up to page 103, and it's, "For whom is it you're weeping?
Mm.
For whom is it you're weeping, down there beside the cyst? Is it Godspeed you're saying as swirls of grief persist? Are they tears of joy for knowing her pains will now desist? Or of anguish as you're thinking how daily she'll be missed? For whom is it you're weeping as you make farewells today? Did you run out of seasons with still so much to say? Can all the wasted chances by tears be washed away? Would plans be all completed had there just been one more day? For whom is it you're weeping, the living or the sleeping?" Mm. That's brilliant. That's beautiful.
No, thank you. You know that, strangely enough, it won awards for poetry, which is stunning to me. I just don't think I'm a poet. So this is rambling, scribbling, really, but
Oh, it's beautiful.
seems good.
But things come through us when we are not, you were mentioning earlier about ego and spirit. And when we allow spirit, the ego doesn't have a place. It's not, you said it's not that we get rid of our ego, but it's that we let the ego move aside so that the spirit can move through us.
You can't just have the yang.
Yeah.
You got to have the yin that goes with it. It's just not possible. When I'm on the mountain teaching, you know what a mogul is? A mogul on a mountain.
It hurt
So a
your
mogul,
knees.
yeah, a mogul requires light and shadow.
Ah,
If you took away the shadow, you wouldn't be able to see the mogul, and
sure.
therefore you wouldn't be able to ski them.
Sure.
And that's the truth of life. If we didn't have dark to go with the light, we wouldn't have a life.
Yeah, that's such a great reminder. We know this, we avoid this.
Yeah. In fact, you saying that is the same sentiment that I expressed earlier. There's nothing new. There's nothing to learn. Just forget.
Yeah.
And it sort of gets concreted over.
Mm-hmm.
So during our lives, it's okay to not tell the truth.
Yeah. Ooh, and the first time it's hard, and after that it gets easier and easier, doesn't it?
And as long as they're not punished for doing it, because that's the other rule, right? If we are going to have a culture here where we tell the truth to each other, then we can't punish each other when we do that.
Right. Right. We have so many lessons and messages to be remembered in this time we are in right now. You made a little bit of a pivot in the middle of COVID, and you created something on Thursdays called Inspiration in the Cloud. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? That's been brilliant. I have loved that so much. I haven't been there every Thursday, but I've loved that. Can you tell us how that happened, how that came to be?
Well, I wrote a book many years ago called, no, wait a minute, let me back up. I created some cards. So higher ground leadership, I decided what are the words that we use a lot in that. So the Castle Principles would be 6 of them. And altogether there were 77. Words like integrity, even profit and customer, those have spiritual meanings too. And they were a runaway success, these little cards. They were in a little bag and there was a bunch of cards. So then I went back to square one and said, okay, I think we need to do this properly. And so we created a terrific set of cards with a brilliant artist called David Rankin, 77 cards, and a book that I wrote, which had all of the full definitions of each word, and little cards for traveling. And so 2 sets of cards in the book. And then mobile phones arrived. And so I thought, oh, maybe we can make an app of this. So we started an app, created an app, and then we upgraded the app. And so now we're actually upgrading it yet again, and we're making a paid version now. It's a free version so far. But the way this all works is the app is downloadable from the Google Play Store or the iPhone Store, Apple Store. And the app's on your phone, and you shake the, I got my phone here.
I know, I was looking for my phone and I don't have it in front of me right now. But yeah.
Phone. I don't know if I've got the right version because I've got an upgraded version here, but let me just see if I can show you.
I've got it right here.
Okay, and I've got mine too.
Okay.
So you shake the phone, and it produces a card. And if you shake it again, it shuffles them and a new card shows up. And then you tap it, and there's a text on the back, which is a short text. Now in the new version, it'll be full. So what happens here, as you know, is that we have a group of people on the phone, 50 people or whatever show up. And I ask somebody, shake your phone and pick a card. So they pick courage. Now at my end, I share my screen, and I've got a multimedia presentation in which I can locate that word courage immediately. And I show a few ideas around what courage means and how we use it, examples of courage, maybe a video about courage and so on. And then we have a conversation together about, well, what is courage like? And then we say, okay, let's pull another card. Now the point of this is, as we were saying earlier, we don't need talking heads. We don't need lectures. There's wisdom in all of us. And what we need to do is tap into that wisdom. And we do. The conversations are astounding, way better than anything I ever experience when I go and hear a lecturer.
Mm.
So, that if you get 100 people online, there's a lot of wisdom there, and somebody's an expert in almost everything. So,
Yeah. And you are so gracious with your time in that. That is the most amazing 30 minutes. It's only 30 minutes. And you allow people to share, and you're very good at no, that's not the right word, at being good with the time. You're a great steward of the time, and your slides are beautiful. They're animated. It's just so fun. And I was wondering how quickly you pivoted to that once we knew we were in lockdown.
well, I'm ranked as one of the top 5 leadership speakers in North America, and that world disappeared. So, I'm scratching my head wondering, what does this look like going
Mhm.
forward? So it gave me an opportunity, and we've all had that opportunity, haven't we? We've got time on our hands, so we've got opportunities to invent. I mean, even if we just take our commuting time away, when I make a speech in, shall we say, Los Angeles, that's a 3-day deal.
Mhm.
I got to get there, I got to make the speech, and then I got to fly home. That's 3 days.
Mhm.
And so I don't do that anymore.
Right.
I've got all that time now. And so I'm inventing all kinds of things that, and I'm actually running a CEO group, and every single one of them is doing better than they were before COVID.
Really?
Every single one of them.
Wow. Okay, there's a huge lesson in that for a lot of us. Oh, about reality, what's real, what's not, what did we believe that it has been pulled out from under us, and is that a limiting belief that was planted there years ago? Those, such great things to
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. So anybody wants to hook up with me and get into one of our groups, we'll help them have the best years of their lives.
So what's the best way to find you, Lance? Well, how would somebody, track you down?
Secretan.com, or just put my name into Google. You'll find me all over the place.
All over the place. Okay. And is Inspiration in the Cloud going to be continuing for?
Well, we started when COVID started,
Yep.
because this is really a commitment, a public service, really, for people who are on the front line, especially, but for anyone else who needed to be inspired and wanted to be inspired. So we started in March, and I said, I'll do it till the end of the month. And then we came to the end of the month, and everyone said, no, you got to continue. Said, okay, we'll do it to the end of April. And then same thing. Okay, we'll do it to the end of May. And then last Thursday was the end of May, and I said, okay, so are we going to stop now? No. So now we're doing it till the end of June.
Good.
So I don't know what's happening after that,
Good.
because I don't know what's happening to COVID or a
Yeah.
lockdown or any of that, right?
Right.
Or the economy. But we're good every Thursday till the end of June, and then we'll see what happens.
And it's 10 o'clock my time, so it's 11 o'clock where you are, right?
Eastern, 11 Eastern.
Time.
Yep.
So 10 Central, and you can adjust as you will for your time
Right.
zone.
Right.
It's been a blast getting to know these people, because you see all these people who are there, and there are maybe 1 or 2 even screens of people. And
Right.
when people, it's been interesting. I don't know if you know this is what happens on the other side of it, but when somebody says something, I go look for them, and I want to see who they are. And I've connected with a couple of people because of what they've said there. And there have been a couple people from near me in Wisconsin. I met somebody.
Right.
So it's really been fun to.
That's great. Who was that, by the way?
Her name is, tell me, I'm going to forget it right now. I've started my own thing that has 700 people in it, and I've kind of confused who my people
Oh,
are right
right.
now. But Sue
Oh, yes. Right.
in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've gotten a chance to have a couple of little side conversations.
That's great.
So
Good.
what's next for Lance Secretan?
Well, I think it's a day at a time right now. I'm doing quite a bit of coaching of leaders, and I'm building on this application that we've just been talking about. So the Indian developers are adding a big extension to it. So the free version is pretty straightforward. All it does right now is it chooses the card. It gives you the little text message, and you can post it on Facebook or other social media.
Mm-hmm.
That's the limit of it at the moment. But the new version has videos, has the full chapter, has the poems that I had a poet write a poem for each of the words.
Mm-hmm.
You can create a community, so I can share my card with you. You know what my card is today. It connects us, even though we're miles away. And of course, you can share it on the internet. Also, there's a carousel, so you can swipe through the cards. So there are lots of add-ons and additions to make it much more robust and much more fun. So they're working on that in India right now, and I hope have it finished next week.
Oh, next week. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'll look forward to that. And then I guess you will be going out into real life. It makes it sound like this isn't real life, but you'll be going back out into in-person meetings as soon as we're able to do that. Is that your plan?
Yeah, but I don't know when that's going to be. I mean, it's one thing to have retail open and so on, people going back to offices, but you know, restaurants are going to still be 6 feet apart from each other inside the restaurant. Most restaurants couldn't handle that.
Mm-hmm.
Economically, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know when we're going to see something like a 5,000 person filling an auditorium.
Right.
That's a long way off. Maybe not this year.
Yeah, I agree. I live in North Dakota where we have a 250 person now. We can have events with up to 250 people.
Really?
So we're slowly coming back, and our restaurants, we're kind of back to normal.
Sitting next to each other?
Well, we're supposed to social distance, and our state never closed down. So we were one of the 8 states that didn't have the restrictions that other
And
people did.
and how's that working?
We have what, 780,000 people in our whole state. So we have cases for sure. We don't have
Right.
that many deaths. We haven't had that much.
Right.
So
That's interesting. Well, it goes to show that there are many ways to deal with this and there's no one answer. And
right,
that's a metaphor too, right?
isn't it? Oh, it sure is. Lance, this has been such a pleasure. I can't even tell you how grateful I am that I came across you in 2006, so many years ago, and have just been so blessed by your inspiration, even though we've never met in person yet.
Right. Yes, is absolutely right. But we'll do that when we can get this whole COVID thing settled down a little bit.
Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you more than you know.
No, thank you, Jody. Lovely to be with you. And I wish everybody who's listening to this to be safe and healthy. And namaste.
Thank you.
Okay.